Zionists and the Prime Minister of Israel all lied through their teeth about Charlie Kirk in the immediate wake of the highest profile political assassination of my lifetime. Candace Owens got us that information. And that's like very important, vital information. So look, if Erica Kirk is coming out and telling me, trust our judicial system, trust our government, then respectfully, with all respect and admiration to your late husband, no.
Dave Smith just defended Candace Owens on her Charlie Kirk investigation and against the Zionist smears and lies against her, and actually weighs in to be critical of Erica Kirk at this point, someone who is not exactly, let's just say, a grieving widow only, and has put herself into the spotlight as the CEO of Turning Point USA. Let's see what Dave has to say about this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
The week that we're filming this right now, yes, there's this major conversation of Candace Owens, Erica Kirk, right? Which I think is important, and I have my opinions on, but I don't want to sort of ride an emotional wave without hearing everything out. But at the same time, the Justice Department has decided that domestic terrorism is a thing, and that people who advocate overthrow of the government are terrorists. That's terrifying, and we're busy not seeing it. Now there's a new visa requirement for immigrants to hand over 5 years of social media if you want to come to the U.S. as a visitor. That's terrifying. This is all Big Brother stuff happening right now. And so it does feel like chaos. How do we scream about the right things right now when there's such stupid distraction? And the death of Charlie Kirk is not stupid. But, you know, ringing in on his widow, I don't think is going to stop. And so I'm really upset that we do see, in the wake of the Charlie Kirk assassination, in the wake of, you know, this idea of rising anti-Semitism, that we're going to see continuing our rights eroded. And I don't know what the path is to make that stop. Who's going to sue the Justice Department for the fact that there's no such thing as domestic terrorists? What do we do about that?
Well, how about, I mean, couldn't you, isn't it something, right, just in the United States of America, I mean, our founding document is the Declaration of Independence, which very clearly says at the very beginning of it that it's the most beautiful document ever, because it says, the opening doesn't even make an argument. It just says it's self-evident that there's a God and that he wants us to be free, which I love. I love not even pretending that that needs to be argued. We take it as self-evident that God wants us to be free. And governments, they're just this institution that man creates to protect our freedom. And if they're not protecting our freedom, or if they're tyrannical, then we have the right and the duty to overthrow that government and replace it with a new one. So the idea that the government that was created by that document could then ever try to say that, like, the overthrowing your own government is some type of like just a moral sin on its face by definition is crazy.
That's exactly right. That's what Jefferson was saying, borrowing from Lockean concepts that governments exist to protect life, liberty, and property under the Lockean social compact theory. And when they go beyond that, when they violate those rights and try to perform other functions, it's the right of the people to alter or abolish them. And that can come after what the document said was a long train of usurpations. And basically that it's not only the people's right to do that, but it's their duty to do that. That's in the Declaration of Independence. The founders were a generation of secessionists, seceding not only from the British Crown and separating into independent political systems on that basis, but also seceded from the Articles of Confederation system that instituted a Confederation Congress to create a new constitution. So the founders were secessionists. There's no argument against this. And no matter how much they want to point to the idea of that being un-American, there's nothing more American than that. That idea is as American as apple pie.
The whole spirit of the country was that you overthrow a tyrannical government. And, you know, as far as the stuff you said, you know, look, like, I don't know Erica. I've never met her. I did know Charlie, and I would have considered him a friend. And I do know Candace, and she's a good friend. And like, so it's a little bit of a weird situation because, geez, I mean, would I ever want to say anything critical about my friend who just died, about his widow who's raising his 2 kids alone? I mean, that just feels like I don't want to say nothing bad about her. But then at the same time, there does become this thing where, like, okay, if you jump in the spotlight after this horrible tragedy where your husband and the father of your children is killed, and you go, you give a eulogy at the funeral or something like that to me is like a hands-off. That doesn't put you as like a public person. But if you're going to take over Turning Points, and now it's like weeks and weeks and weeks later, and you're out on camera leading a thing, you kind of are now in a realm where, like, you're a public person. We have to be allowed to say whether we agree with you or disagree with you, and it's just a very uncomfortable thing. I'll say at the very least, and I have not, I'm so busy with the shows that I do and the topics that I focus on, and I always try to focus on the things that I think are the biggest, most important crises that the country's facing. So I have not watched every Candace Owens episode, and I have not, like, I'm not up on all of her, like, what her theory is on Charlie's assassination. What I will say is that I know that Candace Owens, and Candace Owens alone, revealed something truly remarkable. I'm not saying this has any implications as to who killed Charlie Kirk, but the fact is that the Zionists and the Prime Minister of Israel all lied through their teeth about Charlie Kirk in the immediate wake of the highest profile political assassination of my lifetime.
That's exactly what happened. That is what she revealed, despite all the smears against her, allegations of lying and going down, endless rabbit holes with no proof. She did prove that. She did prove that the Zionists lied through their teeth to try to make Charlie Kirk into the most rigid, Ben Shapiro-esque Zionist martyr in his death, even though 48 hours before it, he had sent a message to a chat group, including Josh Hammer, one of the guys that lied about Charlie for weeks after this, saying that he had no choice but to leave the pro-Israel cause. Also, as Dave mentions, Benjamin Netanyahu twisted and took out of context one part of Charlie Kirk's last letter to him, addressing his admiration for Israel, but the whole rest of the letter contained, basic frustration because he couldn't defend the genocide in Gaza anymore. He said, we were essentially getting our asses handed to us out here on college campuses by all these questions and people turning away from the Israel first mentality, which is playing out, especially among young people. And as far as Erica Kirk, I agree with Dave there too. At one point, I was not critical at all of Erica Kirk. Why would I be? She has a hard job. She is wealthy, but she has to raise children alone that are young and probably won't remember her husband. But at some point, you just don't be only the grieving widow when you become the CEO of Turning Point, and then do things like go on major interviews with Barry Weiss and say, stop trying to investigate the truth about my husband's death. She didn't say it in that words, but she can somehow, 11 or 10 days after Charlie Kirk's murder, find it within her to forgive the actual murderer, according to the FBI. But that's implied to be unforgivable, to stop searching for the truth here among an FBI narrative that, let's just say, there's a lot of holes in, especially when it comes to the 30-06, George Zinn, all sorts of other things related to that. Yeah.
And during an active murder investigation, they were lying. Josh Hammer went out there and said that the rumors that Charlie was turning on Israel were an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. Then Candace Owens revealed that he texted that to Josh Hammer.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, to me, that's really wild. Benjamin Netanyahu read a couple lines from that letter that Charlie Kirk read, immediately after his death, and he omitted the fact that the entire letter was Charlie Kirk going, sir, we're getting killed out here.
You
have
losing.
to totally rethink. You're losing this. So, just that alone, Candace Owens got us that information. And that's very important, vital information. So has she, I kind of look at Candace Owens like, she's like a pit bull, and she's going to grab a thing and just wring it until whatever falls out, falls out. Has she ever grabbed a hold of a thing where nothing fell out? Probably. But she's also grabbed a hold of a few other things where...
We all have.
Yeah, right, right. But so
Yeah, absolutely. That is what Candace does. She's a relentless bulldog. It's something that Dave Smith told me when we had our discussion too, is that she doesn't have the same approach to issues as maybe someone that would create, the most meticulous, perfect case against the enemy's strongest argument for something. She'll just take hold of everything, shake that tree, as Dave said, and some things that fall out of that tree, they might not be that pertinent to the real story, but some are really interesting, like some of the things we've already talked about. I agree with that totally.
I look at that and I go, I don't think it's look, if Erica Kirk is coming out and telling me, trust our judicial system, trust our government, then respectfully, with all respect and admiration to your late husband, no. Sorry, that's not what we do around these parts. Like, I'm not trusting I'm supposed to trust the Justice Department that just got caught with their pants down, straight up saying that the Epstein files didn't exist and they were a Democratic hoax. And then they voted to release said files.
Yeah, and there's over 1 million files. This is exactly right. Sorry, the default is not trust the FBI. The default is not trust the DOJ. The default is not to trust the court system. It's actually to be skeptical and question the DOJ and the deep state in general and the Trump administration when he embarks on a cover-up here. And if not for the heroics of people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Thomas Massie, Ro Khanna, and others to force his hand into releasing those files that supposedly didn't exist, we would have no further answers. And, they've tried to redact whatever they can, but it's very clear that they lied through their teeth about Epstein, what he was, his connections to Israeli intelligence. They lied about the fact that the FBI didn't entertain the possibility of this being blackmail, of this having co-conspirators, because at one point you can see in these leaks that the FBI says there were as many as 10 co-conspirators, and they were entertaining that this was a child sex trafficking ring involving other people. Yeah, we're not trusting those people by default. Sorry. I don't care if you're a grieving widow. If you're in the spotlight as the CEO of Turning Point, we can critique that, and you shouldn't feel bad about critiquing that, by the way.
Yeah.
Sorry, you've blown your trust, for me at least.
Yeah, I mean, as a married person, you think if you were widowed and then the government narrative was so thin, first of all, if you read the indictment of Tyler Robinson, it's extremely thin. People are saying online, well, he confessed. That he did not confess. His parents took him in because he was a known suspect, right? Because they thought he looked like the document is very thin. The government has not made its case. Tyler Robinson is afforded presumptive innocence by our Constitution. And so, I think that as a married person, obsessed with every little, turn and question doesn't even cover it. I would be obsessed with I don't think and so this no, they got it. They got it. It just doesn't comport, sort of mother to mother, wife to wife. I don't know what to think about that. I know that I will commit to never saying no to somebody's questions, even if I don't like that person. And I do quite like Candace Owens, so I'll reveal that bias. But never am I going to say, don't ask that question.
Yeah, especially when we're talking about a high-profile political assassination after watching JFK and the feds cover up the most intricate details of that forever for decades, and this is becoming the new JFK. And you can say that regardless of whatever you think regarding who's culpable for Charlie Kirk's death. Was it a lone nut? Was it a conspiracy? Whatever you think about that, I'm sure glad there are people like Candace Owens asking questions about it. And it's ironic here, too, because Charlie Kirk himself was skeptical of lone nut theories from the feds, including JFK. You can find, evidence of him talking about that on a college campus under one of those tents, saying we shouldn't be, just buying into the FBI's JFK narrative. And that's kind of ironic when it comes to looking at Charlie Kirk and his situation, too.
right? And so
yeah, that's right. And I also do think that there's just like I mean, I don't know, I'm not enough of like a religious expert to know this, but isn't there like in Catholicism, I think like the Pope, if the Pope says something pertaining to religion, then he is an authority over Catholics. But if he says something about football or whatever, that has no Catholic has to follow that. You know what I mean? Like there's the different kind of like lanes. And I do feel too, like if I can imagine, like if I got murdered tomorrow, and like I think if my wife came out and like she represents me in the sense that she's my better half, she's the mother of my children, she's anything that she were to say about like who I was as a person or what our home life was or anything like that, like she's the authority on that. But if my wife came out and told my audience, you know, okay, you got to support Trump in bombing boats in Venezuela or something, I think my audience would be like, whoa, like who are you? You don't have the authority in that lane. Like you don't, it's just like kind of a different thing. And so once you step into that, like Charlie's the one we respected. We respected his opinion on this stuff. We respect, like, this is a whole different thing. And so I don't like, no, now you're getting into a political conversation and I don't have to treat you the same as I do, where like you get to say who Charlie was as a man. I don't get to comment on that. You were his wife. You don't get to tell me how I feel about the Justice Department. These are different lanes.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's what we're seeing here. We're seeing a lot of people, especially the diehard Zionists, try to smear you if you try to weigh in and criticize Erica Kirk or how Turning Point USA is being run after Charlie Kirk's death. But the fact is they're political actors. They're big-time political actors in control of a really big political activism committee, a big organization that Charlie helped build. It was his charisma that helped build it. I wasn't personally the biggest Charlie Kirk fan. I always kind of saw him as an establishment shill for Israel. We learn more and more about how much he truly was turning away from the pro-Israel mentality. I think the interview that brings it out the most is his August 6th appearance on the Megyn Kelly show in 2025. If you watch that back, he is very frustrated about people calling his character into question. And as we know, at that time frame in the summer of 2025, by way of the incredible journalism at the Gray Zone by Max Blumenthal, a 3-piece investigation, we know that high-ranking, very rich billionaire Zionist donors had decided they were going to withdraw their donations to Turning Point USA, Robert Shillman and Bill Ackman among them, because he decided to dig in his heels and invite Tucker Carlson. And he invited Tucker Carlson to their December event, too, a speech that just took place. Guess who he didn't invite? Ben Shapiro, and there is evidence behind the scenes that Candace and others have revealed that Ben Shapiro and Charlie Kirk didn't have the best relationship. Whatever you think about their politics, Israel, etc., they weren't exactly friends. But nevertheless, Ben Shapiro was invited to Turning Point USA's December event too. And what did he do with his opportunity on the stage? He used it to smear all the top conservatives on the right who have turned their back on the pro-Israel, Israel first mentality, like Tucker Carlson, like Candace Owens, like Nick Fuentes, like Steve Bannon. You know, just completely smearing them, calling them, you know, lunatic conspiracy theorists and all this nonsense at this Turning Point event that he was not going to be invited to from Charlie Kirk. He didn't appear on the early invitee list that was out there in August. And for good reason. It looks like the Zionists are trying to maintain the stranglehold of the organization, take it back from the direction that it looked like Charlie was going to lead it in, and that's not embracing this pro-Israel mentality in everything. We know in his last months, Charlie Kirk pled with Donald Trump not to bomb Iran, not to get into a regime change war there, and not to adopt the foreign policy that the neocon idiots like Mark Levin and Ben Shapiro wanted us to. That's what we know about the end of Charlie Kirk's life. So no, Erica Kirk is not impervious to all criticism. She's not immune to it simply because she is a widow, and she is a widow. But she has stepped into the spotlight, into a position of political leadership where she is susceptible to criticism, especially when you're saying, you know, don't investigate all the angles to this assassination. Don't search for the truth. Don't reveal this stuff. Saying that to Barry Weiss in an interview when asked about Candace Owens in particular, when she said, stop. but somehow she could forgive Charlie Kirk's killer 10 days, 11 days after his murder. I'm sorry, it doesn't really align. It's not consistent with any kind of narrative that we should believe. And yeah, we should be skeptical of the DOJ, of the court system, and of the FBI. We'll never stop that on this channel. And I'm mostly with Dave Smith here. This is just the truth. So regardless of what you think about who's responsible for Charlie Kirk's murder, I think the biggest story underneath this is how this turning point pressure saga against Charlie Kirk was really a microcosm for the influence of the Israel lobby on the American government, because you saw it in microcosm in this organization and how they wanted to steer the American right at a time where it is being fractured over Israel. For the first time in my life, that is one of the most encouraging things that I look at in politics, to be honest with you. The fact that people are not, just accepting wholesale all of this drivel that we should send them endless amounts of money, get into regime change wars on behalf of them like we did in Syria and Libya and Iraq and Somalia, still bombing Somalia, and let them get away with welcoming Jonathan Pollard on the red carpet by Netanyahu. Let them get away with genociding a people that's beleaguered and subjugated in Gaza on our dime. Let them get away with bombing another ostensible U.S. ally in Qatar, despite the fact our biggest U.S. air base is there, and pay no ramifications for it. Let them get away with carving out new expansions in the West Bank settlements in Syria and Lebanon, and let them consummate the Greater Israel Project in general and expand Israel's borders beyond what they are. A lot of people are saying no. People that are in the weeds paying attention to this stuff are saying no, especially younger people. Not exclusively, but it is younger people. Whereas on the right, it used to be just, Pat Buchanan and Ron Paul, and they were the aberrations, and they were smeared for it routinely, called anti-Semitic. People still are called anti-Semitic for that. The trick is being worn out, though, and it's not taking hold, especially when you call the Jewish critics of Israel anti-Semitic. No one accepts that anymore, and yet that's their only tool in the toolbox that they use. But we'll see what happens from here, man. But I'm telling you that you can't trust the deep state. You can't trust the military-industrial complex. You can't trust the Israel lobby to tell you the truth about everything. And that holds to the Charlie Kirk investigation as well. So I thought this was a great interview. What do you guys think? Let me know down below about this situation. Please let me know in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Also subscribe to Redacted. Great podcast, great segment. I really like their show. They cover a lot of interesting topics, and they have a huge channel. It's definitely worth subscribing to them if you haven't. Also, if you like this video, please consider joining as a YouTube member. You can do that by clicking the join button down below. If you do that, you can gain immediate access to all my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. So you'll be able to see those members only videos right away, and I really appreciate your support if you do. And also, if you want a free copy of my first book, Compact of the Republic, click the link in the description below. It'll send you to a website. You just plug in your email address, and I'll send you a full PDF copy of that entire book, free of charge, no obligation, just because I appreciate you. And look, my demands are simple. No more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.